Welcome to Epithets, exploring the sacred titles of Hekate.
I call the beloved goddess of the roads and places where three ways meet, heavenly, earthly, and in the sea, the saffron-cloaked goddess of graves, performing the Bacchic rites with the souls of the dead, the daughter of Perses, lover of solitude who delights in deer, the nocturnal goddess, protector of dogs, implacable queen, roaring like a beast with image ungirt and irresistible, bull-herding queen and key-bearer to all the universe, ruler, nymph, and nursemaid who haunts the hills. I pray you, maiden, to attend these rites, always with a kind heart, to your oxherd. That is the first Orphic hymn translated by Patrick Dunn, and that is the Orphic hymn for Hekate. Welcome to the podcast Epithets, where we explore all the sacred titles of Hekate. I am Isaac Vars, one of your co-hosts, and this is Robin Silverman, the other co-host. Say hi.
Hello, I'm Robin Silverman.
And we're going to be talking about, well, the goddess Hekate and her epithets. We want to introduce ourselves first, kind of start off by saying, who are these people who are talking about Hekate? As I said, my name is Isaac. I am the co-owner of Deep Earth Arts. It's a metaphysical shop slash spiritual center slash studio up here in Littleton, New Hampshire. I am an herbalist. I am a Reiki practitioner. I have been working with Hekate since summer of 2021. We'll be getting into that a little bit. I've been a practitioner of a few different magical systems for a very long time. It's always been something that is in my interest range. So I make a lot of cool magical things for the shop here, do a little bit of witchy work for the community, as well as read tarot and work with some other divinatory tools. And that's kind of my background. Robin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm a witch and an herbalist, originally from northern New Hampshire, now living in Philadelphia. And I've been a witch pretty much since childhood in different ways. But I started working with Hekate in 2003. I was a classics major at Bryn Mawr College and discovered Hekate there. And she's been with me ever since.
I love it. Cool. So that's us. That's who's showing up to talk with you about the goddess Hekate. Talking about Hekate, we're going to do a little bit of intro for her because maybe you're new to Hekate, maybe you're new to some of her mythology, which I'm really interested to kind of dig a little bit into that with you, Robin, about the mythology, because especially the early stuff, it's kind of, besides talking about kind of some of her domains, she doesn't show up a lot in like the mythological stories. Like as a person, at least not a lot. We have a few different things that she shows up with, but we were talking earlier about how do we how do we describe Hekate? What is her realm? A good place to start would be talking about her as the goddess of witchcraft, though that's not necessarily something, I don't know, that kind of, from what I understand, that started showing up when people started telling the story of Medea. Instead, it seems that she is this powerful, a titan that didn't lose her dominion when the Olympians took over. Somebody who a lot of times shown as a liminal goddess, somebody who's in between. I what did you have kind of a good elevator pitch for Hekate?
I don't. And over the years, I've tried really hard to come up with one because I get people asking this question all the time. Well, who is Hekate? Well, she's she's the goddess of witches. She's liminal. She's weird. One of the things that that I like to talk, one of the stories I like to talk about with Hekate is her role in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, the Demeter Persephone story, her role in that story where she's the one who sees it all, right? In that story, I don't want to go too far into the weeds with the story itself, but in that story, Persephone is abducted, right, to the underworld. And Hekate is the one who sees that. She sees it happen. She's the one who is able to communicate to the other gods that this has happened, because Hekate can go to any world, right? She can, from the underworld all the way up to the top of Mount Olympus. She's the one who has access to everything, right? She's the one who can open all the doors. She's the one who lets us through. And to me, that's sort of the essence of her as a goddess of witchcraft. And why, to me, she is the goddess of witchcraft is that she's the one who opens the door. She's the one, she is the door, in that sense. She's the way through. And she's the one who breaks us free from our limits by working with her. And that I feel like is kind of the essence of it, of who she is and what she's about. She is, if you read, the Theogony, the story of the origin of the gods by Hesiod, which is one of the earliest accounts we have of, the origins of the gods. Hekate is really important in that story. And yet, as you say, her actual role and person and who she is and what she's about is really unclear. Just that she's really important, right? She's described as being really important, but not really how or why. And yeah, this role of hers in like in the story of Demeter and in other places as being the one who shows us the way, the one who lets us through the door, the one who is the door in some ways. So that's how I kind of think of her when I have to do an elevator pitch of Hekate.
Well, it is in the Theogony that's where they mention, where Zeus is the one that holds her above other gods,
Yes.
all other gods,
Yep.
who holds her in high regards, which is kind of a big deal when you're, the head god of a pantheon,
Right.
and you're like, well, but this goddess, she's a big deal, and actually, I give her a lot of respect, and that puts her in the place. I think that's probably the first time, maybe, that it is talked about, where Hekate is spoken of as a goddess of the land, sea, and sky, somebody who has dominion over these three realms, and the things that happen there. They're connecting her to fishermen work, to shepherds, and I don't remember if any jobs came with the more celestial bit there, but I guess I would kind of put her over astronomers and those who watch the planets.
Yeah.
But along with all of that, later she gets these roles as protector of homes, having the what is the specific name that they would use for the triple-bodied statues that would guard the doors?
Gosh, I'm blanking on that one too, but I know what you mean. They would have these
Yes.
little these little statues with offerings at the door.
Is it just a
kind of guard your house.
Hecateon?
I think it's called a Hecateon, but I don't quote me.
Okay, that's fine.
I know exactly what you mean, and the word is just escaping me at the moment. But yeah.
So if you're listening to this podcast, just please reach into our minds and understand what we're trying to say. She has this role as guardian, as somebody who's watching over the household, or specifically watching over the entrances. Again, her being this in-between character. And then I had mentioned her connection to Medea, as well as Kirke in mythology, where it really kind of cements her as the goddess of witchcraft and working with herbs for healing or for harm in those stories.
Yeah.
But very deeply connected to herbal work, which is one of those things that I never really knew about her until I had my big connection, big moment of connection to her.
Yeah.
And it was one of my favorite aspects of her, because as an herbalist, I'm like, ooh, she does the plants too. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And she does them for magic. I like it. But yeah. And then later on, her role as the soul of the world in the Chaldean oracles, and then things get weird after that.
Shakespeare, Macbeth. But yeah, I feel like the soul of the world in the Chaldean oracles is kind of, it makes sense in the context of she's the one who is in, you know, both the underworld and the highest realms, because
Yeah.
that's the soul of the world, is this axis mundi in the Chaldean
Mhm.
oracles, where yeah, she is the soul of the world because she is the thing that links the worlds. She is the way through the worlds. And you know, the theurgists got pretty esoteric with all that, but it comes from a point that makes sense, that makes total sense to me. I think some people look at that and think that Hekate of the Chaldean oracles is some kind of different figure, but to me it seems completely consistent with who she is and what she's about.
Yeah, that just makes sense. That's just one of the aspects we've been talking about.
Mhm.
It is, I think actually that's one of the reasons why, I think this podcast is important, because a lot of times when people know her on a surface level, they know her as kind of the spooky goddess of magic and ghosts. And
Mhm.
that's there.
Yep, she
She
is that.
amongst other things, she is the spooky goddess of magic and ghosts. But even her relationship with ghosts for me is very, comes more from a compassion place. It's
Mhm.
more like, oh, you're lost. You need
Yeah,
some support.
yeah.
I got you. Uh, but I guess we're going to be, that kind of goes into the epithets a little bit. So I want to actually make room to talk about epithets a little bit. If you don't know what an epithet is, it is an honorary or uh, kind of a worshipful descriptor word. And Hekate has a lot of them. A lot of them. There is an article online. It's on Pathos. It's from Matt Oren, I believe, that lists over 100 epithets
Mhm.
of Hekate, and it's not. It's there's still more out there. That's just all these different historical titles that have been given to her. Some we don't know exactly what they mean. Others are very, or seem straight and to the point, but they go out, and that's kind of what we want to explore here on this podcast. We want to make room to look at each of these descriptive titles to understand Hekate in a deeper way. Because as you'd mentioned, Robin, with her being she who kind of unbinds, or rather goes beyond the boundaries. I mean, even her name means worker from afar. There is a certain amount of going beyond with her. And with that, there's all these different roles that she has, but she's not just one role. She is more than that. She fills this role, but she is not the role. But that is a way to connect to her and her power and her energy, which kind of brings us to our stories about why we're so into Hekate. Robin, I'll let you tell your story first, and then
Sure.
I'll tell mine.
All right. Well, as I said, I've been a witch my whole life. I actually remember the first spell I ever did. I was maybe 4 years old, and I wrote a wish on a piece of paper and put it in a tree trunk. And I don't know why I did that. I don't even remember what the wish was, but like I knew that that's who I am and that's what I was supposed to do, you know? And so through, you know, most of my teens and early 20s, as a lot of us do, I was seeking. And I always had this feeling of being an imposter, right? Of being like, I'm not a real witch because there's real witches out there somewhere, right? I'm just somebody who likes to read books and do weird little spells, and you know, I like to study, but somewhere out there there's the real witches. I need to find the real witches, and I never quite could, you know, like um I would, you know, meet up with these groups and things, and they would be doing interesting things, but it wouldn't be what I was looking for as far as like what the real witches do. And as I said, I was a classics major at Bryn Mawr College. I actually started there because I wanted to be an archaeology major, but then I took a Greek class and realized that what I was really interested in was less the object and more the language. So I became a classical studies major, and there's a professor at Bryn Mawr by the name of Radcliffe Edmonds who has done a lot of work on the Orphic mysteries. That's what he's most known for. But he teaches a class there. He was one of my main Greek teachers, but he was also teaches a class on ancient magic. And this would have been in about 2003. And that I took his magic class. And one of the main texts for the magic class was the PGM. And at that point, I know nowadays, like, you can't turn around without seeing somebody holding the PGM or teaching a class on the PGM or whatever. Everybody talks about the PGM now. In 2003, I'd never heard of it. Like, I had no idea. And that was one of the main texts of the class. And I was reading these like spells in the PGM and just being like, all right, this is cool. This stuff is great.
And
because this is the
just
stuff.
for
Oh, sure.
just for people who don't know what the PGM is.
Yeah, thank you. The PGM is the Greek Magical Papyri, which is a collection of spells from the ancient world. The translations out there is by Hans Dieter Betz. It's pretty easy to find these days. It didn't used to be, but it is now. And if you're interested in ancient magic, it's indispensable, because it's a collection of prayers and spells from the ancient world. And yeah, the magic in there felt like the magic I was looking for. Like I said, I was, I was in my 20s in the 90s, and there was a lot of this sort of Wicca, Dianic Wicca type stuff going on. No shade on that, but it wasn't what I was looking for, and I found the PGM. I was like, all right, this is cool stuff. This is what I think of as magic, even though, a lot of the spells in there aren't things any modern person would actually do. There's materials and procedures in there that none of us would do, but it really hit a nerve for me. And then what really hit a nerve was when we read, there's a PGM spell called a prayer to Selene for any working. And it's this long prayer to the goddess Selene, who's the goddess of the moon, but really it's about Hekate. And I just fell in love with this whole prayer. I thought it was just the coolest thing ever. And I got into this practice of reciting it in Greek because I understood what it was talking about, because I really didn't. It just felt really good to say. Elfe moi despoine phile triprosope Selene. It just felt super cool. But you can't really recite that prayer in Greek too often without something showing up. And Hekate showed up. And it was like all the different sort of little pieces I'd had in my life of magic and witchcraft and herbalism. Like you, I was already an herbalist at that point. I'd already, really deeply studied plants and herbalism. And so I had all these little pieces that I had been trying to find a place for, right? Like, looking in these sort of Wiccan groups or pagan groups or Druid groups or whatever. And I finally had, I guess, an overarching narrative for them that Hekate kind of gave me. And I no longer was looking for the real witches. You know what I mean? Because I found them. And I found an understanding and a depth to that point had just sort of felt unsatisfying and fragmented. So I kind of built my own little practice out of that. I kept doing the same kind of magic that I was doing, but I had this, like I said, I got this connection with Hekate that just kicked everything up into, next level. And then in 2016, I took Jason Miller's Sorcery of Hekate course, which is Jason has his own system, his own thing that he teaches. And that really took it even to the next level, because it's a very structured, organized, specific kind of working that really, once again, I had the feeling of all these pieces I had collected being made even more coherent. So I've been doing that practice since 2016. And and Hecate's been with me ever since. She's with me every day. I just had a really curious experience with her yesterday that I won't get into right now, but she's there for me all the time now.
Yeah. And curious experiences are definitely a thing.
Aren't they?
Well, even with, oh my gosh, even with this, Rob and I have been talking about doing this podcast for a bit. And this morning I wanted to get into work, get in early. And I realized that I had accidentally grabbed my husband's keys. And I have to drive back home, get it to him. And Hekate, one of her roles, as we had mentioned, both being the one who stands at the door, who is the door, but also the one who bears the key to open the door. Mm-hmm. So being the key bearer, Lydokos, it was not, the irony was not lost on me that I was late because of keys. And that is just a weird, funny, synchronous thing that seems to pop up a lot with her. Yeah. And I guess it's kind of easy because she has fingers in so many pies. But keys are an important symbol of her, which kind of goes into my story a little bit. I've been trying to figure out my magical practice for a while. I've always, ever since I was little, I was drawn to magic. I was playing around with magic. Magic was important to me, and connecting spiritual work was always important to me. And trying to find and understanding magic, certain parts of it always made sense to me. The idea of kind of pulling pulling on fate strings to make things happen. I don't know how to describe that, but it's a thing. It kind of comes. It's a thing that you get a sense for, I think, and that came easily to me when I was younger. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's this is how to just magically play around with things, and this is how to talk to unseen things. This is just kind of part of it, and those unseen things helped me get through some really tough bits in my childhood. But I always have a hard time like getting a good structure. I had gone through worked with a few different groups, ups and downs, things kind of went sideways. And that brings us to my relationship with Hekate. For the longest time, I've known about her, but didn't really know about her. I always had that idea that, oh, she's just, kind of that, yeah, that kind of dark and spooky goddess that I don't know a lot about. And she's somewhere in the Hellenistic pantheon, which isn't my thing anyway. So that was, I kind of never paid attention. In 2021, in March 2021, I was doing a ceremony that involved kind of checking in with the spirits around me. And there's this aspect of giving and receiving with it. And, you kind of try to make room to, I guess, with, visionary in vision. I don't want to use the word psychic because that's overused and not, but anyway, in vision, third eye vision, you kind of get an idea of what is being given and taken, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. And in this one, it didn't really make sense to me at the time. I was given a skeleton key, not just a key, but a skeleton key. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I forget about it. Fast forward, it's a few months, and I'm kind of flailing because, again, I had this big fallout with a spiritual tradition that I was in. And I met Robin, and in person, we were online friends, and she came to our shop, and she started really talking up Jason's course, which she had mentioned. And I decided, well, I'm going to play around with a little bit of mantra work. So I actually tried doing mantra work with a few different, like playing around with different mantras, connecting to a few different deities. But one of the ones that was starting to really connect with me was the mantra for Hekate in Jason's course. And that was getting interesting for me. Fast forward to November, Jason does a big global rite for Hekate. And I decided, or rather, he has a global rite for Hekate that people can be part of. I decided to do that on my own and had a really powerful experience. Like, it was a powerful ceremony for me. And I know that part of it was building up that connection with the mantra. But afterwards, I had, like, throughout November and December, I had this big ecstatic connective experience. And what I'd be doing is a little bit of the mantra work, but then I'd be doing kind of a prayer litany using the different epithets in Greek, or just connecting to these different epithets, these different roles and names. And the more that I researched these epithets, the more I got to know her and understand that how meaningful she is to me versus my idea of what she was before this. The idea of this connection to the plants, this connection to liminality, which is more important than, arguably one of the most important parts of her, this in-between nature, this just unbound power that is also the animating soul of the universe that also lifts people up, but also has this terrifying aspect. There's so much there, and I was having this deep ecstatic. I would be having these ecstatic connections to her, getting this information from her, different bits of personal gnosis, some that are weird that I probably will never share, and other parts that just make more sense. And I've been in it ever since. I've been all about working with her and been working with her as a devotee for quite a while since that moment. So it's been an exciting ride. And now I've done all of the courses with Jason that Robin had mentioned. And they're interesting, as she said, he has like his own way of working with her. But I think that it was really interesting to go to one with a relationship that I had already built with her, and then also having an idea of who she is outside of that course, which helped me understand the course, but also to know where my understanding of her maybe differed or expanded on it. It helped me create my own thing. So that's kind of where I am now, and that's my relationship with her. And because the epithets had such an important bit in me connecting to her, I think that kind of helps bring us to here, this podcast. So what we're going to be doing each episode after this, we are going to be covering an epithet, talking about the word, kind of it's linguistic stuff. And from there, we'll talk about its historical meaning, different aspects of how that might affect the way we view her, and then also perhaps our own relationship with that specific epithet of Hekate. And I believe on the list, the next one that we have planned is phosphorus, right?
Is it phosphorus?
Brilliant. So that
absolutely brilliant.
because it is bright and brilliant.
Yes.
Spoilers. But that'll be what we're doing, getting into the nitty-gritty, the history, and going beyond the uh the more shallow view of the goddess Hekate, getting deeper to understand her in her deep, multifaceted nature. And also, it's a wonderful devotional act for both Robin and I to kind of put out there for Hekate. But
absolutely, I want to jump in and point out
Yeah.
something that I actually just noticed as I was telling my story and you were telling yours, is that prayer I mentioned that I got kind of obsessed with for a while is really just a list of epithets. I mean, there's other stuff going on, but it's mostly a list of epithets. So you and I both had the experience of getting into reciting these epithets in Greek and having that be like our introduction to Hekate.
Mhm.
So I think that's really cool that we have that parallel experience. And I think that's one of the reasons why the epithets are important, because they are, the gateway to getting
Yes,
to know her.
absolutely. And it is. It's if somebody makes time to just make a practice in the morning, like, just start your morning or end your evening, however you roll, uh, and just kind of say, give gratitude and honor Hekate, and then go off, about all the different epithets. She'll show up, one way or another. She's going to show up. I think I was having so many weird, especially when I was in that like specific, like ecstatic period. Uh, I was having so many weird
Yeah.
synchronicities happening during that time. I mean, they still happen, but it was really intense. I was, it was an intense experience, and it really does come down to working with the sacred titles of Hecate, because you'd mentioned the Preta Selene, and that this is a good point to mention that she is Hecate is older than Hecate, the myth of Hecate. There's a lot of other deities that came before Hellenistic Hecate that share a lot of her attributes, that it's really hard not to look at them and be like, oh yeah, okay, so that's okay. This is pre-Hecate, Hecate.
Mhm.
And also she was conflated with so many different
Mhm.
deities. Artemis, Selene, uh, she is conflated with Isis in some PGM spells.
Yep.
She's got she's got a lot of crossover with different other deities, and then she has deep connections to certain deities, like Zeus holding her up. Her and Helios are super connected. Her and Hermes super connected, and those are when we get tired, when we start to exhaust all the epithets, we can start talking about those connections. It really is. For somebody who does not show up in mythology and the mythological stories a lot, she's got a lot of history.
She does. She does. I two of the things that come to mind as you were talking, there's that line in the Theogony, which I've never been able to figure out, which is talking about her and Hermes. She is good with Hermes in the byre, like it's like a farming kind of thing. Like she'll make your ox herds grow with Hermes. I have no idea what that means, but I think it's really cool. Like this idea of her sort of synergizing with Hermes.
Mhm.
And gosh, there was another thing, and now I'm blanking on it because I got excited about that bit because I work with Hermes as well, and so the sort of her Hekate Hermes crossover is something I'm always looking into. And there was another thing, and I'm blanking on it. Sorry.
No, I love that, and there's so many little tidbits, and it's really tricky because one, I'm trying to keep it so trying to keep at least this episode very introductory level, but you get excited and you start going off on little historical tangents and like, oh, this is cool, and this is cool, and this is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, even I had mentioned we started with an Orphic hymn, and I didn't even explain what the Orphic hymns are, which I'm just an old collection of different hymns to mostly Hellenic gods. So it's a few in here that you're like, okay, that's Hellenic adjacent, and it's all in Greek, ancient Greek. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the was it 4th or 7th century? I feel like. Do you remember
gosh,
what century the Orphic hymns are from?
I'm thinking 4th, but I'm terrible with
I'll
dates.
have an
That's one thing I
answer.
know about myself is I'm terrible with dates. For somebody who studies as much history as I am, I'm always bad with dates.
The copy that we have here, translated from Patrick Dunn, he does have a a timeline in here somewhere, I think, but I'd have to actually read it. And we're recording, so maybe not right now.
these are the Orphic hymns, and they reference the specific mystery called of Orpheus, which is a whole other topic, which we don't need to dig into just now.
Right. No. But with all these hymns, the first one is to Hekate.
Yes.
Because, she's important. So, and it's really, that's another, working with the Orphic hymns is a whole other fun thing because this another old source that has a deep astral groove, and all these different deities have this poem, and most of them have an incense you're supposed to burn with it, and that right there is, and then you can kind of plug and play with them and all this different kind of spell work. So Patrick Dunn's translation is fantastic. Sarah Mastros also has a really fun translation that is, I'd say, a little more poetic, but in a fun way. And she has a lot of applicable magical stuff in there too, if that's what you're interested in. But that, again, Hecate adjacent, reeling myself back in.
I feel like we need to do a bibliography to go with this. Tell people where to look.
We're going to be throwing out a bunch of different books, I feel like, as we go. I'll be referencing a lot of Sarita Deste's work, because she has a lot of stuff out there about Hekate, and she really knows her history. And there's a lot of, you mentioned older sources, so Theogony, Orphic hymns, the Greek Magical Papyri. We got stuff. We've got things to be bringing to folks, but I think that is a pretty good introduction right there, and we've definitely went about the time I was hoping to get this intro in. So before we go anywhere, do you have anything else you want to share for this episode?
Just that I'm really excited to be doing this. As you said, this is sort of a devotional practice. And one of the things you observed, which I've also felt, is that the more devotional you get with Hekate, the more interesting life gets. So I'm kind of looking forward to what that's going to bring to us.
Absolutely. I'm ready to work in a little more magic. Interestingly, I think that we were talking a little bit about when we first started. I first started messaging Robin about this on a Wednesday, the day of Hermes. And because I was in my head, I was thinking about it. And I think that that was, gosh, it might have been the Wednesday after, if it wasn't the Wednesday after the eclipse, the most recent solar eclipse, it was a week after.
It was really close to the eclipse. Yeah, the eclipse. And then we had that really weird full moon. The whole energy that week was just so intense.
And I think and we were talking about how we'd noticed that a few other people are doing
Yeah.
projects involving the epithets. And they just started doing it about the same time. And I think it might have been a little bit of that solar eclipse energy that might have kind of kickstarted it. So with other Hecatean practitioners, I don't know, but brilliant. Well, I look forward to exploring this more with you, Robin. And well, I think that this is a good spot to end. So we are hoping to release episodes every other week. And you'll hear this one on a Wednesday. I'd mentioned it's the day of Hermes Mercury. So it's a good day to be releasing podcasts. Thank you for joining us. And until next time.